When I first met my son's fiancée, she burst out laughing straight away. "You don't even need a Halloween mask. You're scary enough without it." That comment felt like a betrayal. Then, when her parents saw me, they started crying and murmured, "Is it really you?" Their reaction flipped her world upside down. I was prepping dinner and did one last check on the roast, pressing on the crust to make sure it was just perfect. The potatoes were golden, just like my late wife Marie used to make, and the green beans were served in a dish handed down from my mom. After 62 years, I knew how much first impressions mattered, and I wanted Gordon's fiancée to see that his dad could host a decent meal. The dining room was spotless. I had polished the mahogany table that morning, placed the chairs just right, and swapped out the paper napkins for cloth ones. Her name is Pearl Morrison. She and Gordon had been seeing each other for 4 months, and he was more excited about her than I've seen in the years since his divorce. I was hoping this dinner would go smoothly. I wanted him to be happy, to embrace anyone who made him smile like that again. At exactly 6 p.m., the doorbell chimed. I straightened my shirt, opened the door with what I hoped was a welcoming smile. "You don't need a Halloween mask. You're scary enough." Pearl's quip felt like cold water splashed on my face. She stood there grinning, her blonde hair pulled back, dressed in something likely more expensive than my retirement check. Gordon was beside her, not defending me, just giving an awkward laugh that twisted my gut. My smile stiffened. "Come in. Dinner's ready." Pearl walked by, giving everything a once-over. She touched the door frame, glanced at the coat rack, and took in the living room from the entrance, evaluating it all like a critic. Gordon followed her, patting my shoulder more like an apology than a greeting. In the dining room, I pulled out their chairs. Pearl sat, scanned the table, then looked at the walls. "Gordon mentioned you've been here forever," she remarked, running a finger along the edge of the table. "The furniture shows it. Ever think about updating?" I politely placed the roast on the table. "I'm happy with how it is." She shot back with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course you are." Gordon cleared his throat. "Dad's always had a sentimental attachment to the place, right, Dad?" I sliced the roast and served it up. Pearl nudged her plate back a little without taking a bite. Small gesture, but I caught it. I'm catching everything now. "So, Clarence," Pearl said, holding her fork like it was contaminated, "now that you're retired, how do you spend your days?" "I find ways to keep busy," I replied. "I'm sure you do," she said, chewing on a small bite as if to prove a point. "Isn't it lonely in such a big house? Thought about downsizing? This place must cost a lot to maintain." Gordon leaned in her direction, unknowingly siding with her. I sat at the head of my own table, feeling outnumbered. "The house is paid off," I said. "The upkeep is reasonable." Pearl set her fork down. "Still, for one person to have 4 bedrooms? Gordon mentioned this area isn't as nice as it used to be. Property value changes over time." Her words made me stop, realizing she wasn't just making small talk. She was assessing the value. "The neighborhood's all right," I retorted. "Of course," she replied, placing a hand on Gordon's arm possessively. "Gordon and I have been thinking about the future. Once we're married, renting seems pointless when there's space to spare here. We could really refresh this place." And there it was, the real reason for dinner. She wasn't here to get to know me. She was here to stake a claim. I glanced at Gordon, but he avoided my gaze. "This is my home," I said quietly. Pearl's smile widened. "Of course it is for now." The silence felt like standing on the edge of something dangerous. My hands wanted to shake from the anger, but with 3 decades of firefighting behind me, I knew how to hold my composure. I stood up from my chair, giving them a clear hint the evening had come to an end, and thanked them for stopping by. Gordon seemed a bit taken aback, saying, "Dad, we just arrived." But I was firm, repeating that we were done for the night. Pearl didn't hide her annoyance for a moment before quickly covering it up as she started gathering her things. "Well, I guess we know where we're at now," she commented, dramatically snatching up her purse. Gordon glanced between us, confused, as if Pearl hadn't spent the evening making snarky remarks about me. I walked them to the door, feeling the bite of the cold March air as I opened it. Pearl clacked her heels on the porch as she left. Gordon hesitated, beginning with, "Dad," but I interrupted with a brisk, "Good night, Gordon." Once they were out, I shut and locked the door. Alone in the quiet house, I noticed my hands were shaking a bit. The dinner I'd spent hours preparing lay untouched in the kitchen. Pearl's plate was still full, discarded like it didn't matter. I took my time cleaning up, tossing the barely eaten food into the trash. While washing the dishes, I felt the tension in my jaw from clenching it. It was infuriating how Pearl acted like she was already making changes in my home, and my own son just sat there allowing it. With the last dish dried, I turned off the kitchen light and lingered in the dark living room, too angry to even consider going to bed, replaying the night over and over in my head. Her smug expressions, Gordon's way of trying to keep peace, her comments about the unused parts of the house. It was as if she was already planning her takeover, as if I was just an object in her way. Slowly, my anger shifted into clarity. I wasn't seen as a person, just an obstacle in her quest. I didn't sleep one bit that night, just sat in my favorite chair, watching shadows dance on the ceiling from the streetlights outside. Her mocking voice stuck in my mind. I couldn't shake the sight of Gordon just laughing nervously instead of sticking up for me. By the time the sky began to lighten, I'd replayed the evening numerous times. The truth was clear. This wasn't about us as a family. It was about what Pearl wanted to claim. Around 8:30 the next morning, the phone rang with Gordon's name appearing on the caller ID. Picking it up, I simply said, "Yes?" He launched right into it, sounding angry and accusing me of embarrassing them the night before. He said Pearl was just trying to be friendly and that I was being standoffish. "What's the issue?" he demanded. "The issue is being disrespected in my own home," I countered. He called me overly sensitive and insisted I needed to apologize to her, but I felt something inside of me crystallize. "I don't think so," I replied, staying firm. He sounded almost like a sulking teenager when he said, "Fine, don't expect to hear from us for a while," and hung up. I pulled the phone away, looking at my hands. The shaking was gone, replaced by a kind of steady calm. That next week felt strange, like I was observing my life from a distance. I kept on with my usual routine, my morning walks, grocery shopping on Tuesday, coffee at the diner every Thursday, but the void where Gordon used to be was noticeable. Twice I drove past his apartment, but I never stopped, never called, just drove by, wondering if Pearl was in there scheming. Every night I found myself in front of the computer, studying Oregon's inheritance laws, estate planning, property rights. The bright screen hurt my eyes, but I was determined, taking notes, highlighting anything about safeguarding one's property from family claims. It was as if I was preparing for a battle I hadn't chosen. A week after the tense call, Gordon reached out again, this time bubbling with excitement. "Dad, fantastic news. Pearl and I are engaged. We're planning the wedding for July." I stayed calm, but questioned the speed of it. "Isn't that a bit quick?" He insisted that when you know, you know, and said they both felt ready. Then he casually slipped back into talking about logistics, and there it was, my house included in their plans. "With all that room, it just makes sense," he explained, as if it was already decided. I couldn't resist pushing back, even though I already had a sense of what he was hinting at. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I had an idea. "You've got those empty rooms in the house, and you're there all by yourself. It would really help us out if you let us stay, he justified. Pearls even picked out some paint colors for the rooms, he threw in, as though the decision was already made. That riled me up. Those aren't guest rooms. It's my house, I fired back. Gordon let out a sigh, told me not to be so selfish, and insisted I should think about family. But that word, family, didn't sit right with me. I decided to make things crystal clear. Gordon, let's get one thing straight. You're not moving in. Feeling upset but resolute, I reached a decision. I'd had just about enough. There was no way I could have been more serious when I said, absolutely not. Not now, not after the wedding, not ever. To wrap up the discussion, I hung up before he had another chance to speak. As I held that silent phone, a shift happened within me. The hurt was gone. I wasn't trying to defend myself anymore. If they wanted to mess around with my life, fine by me. But this time, they picked the wrong person to mess with. I marched into my study, yanked open the filing cabinet, and took out everything important. House deed, will, bank records, pension details. I spread it all across my desk and took stock of what my life had added up to. Everything I'd spent years fighting fires for, saving lives and earning through sheer hard work. They thought they could just waltz in and take over, thinking I was just some old guy who couldn't stand up for himself. Fueled with new determination, I grabbed the phone and called up a notary service. I needed someone to come over and get my estate documents in order, pronto. Within 2 days, a professional woman in her 40s arrived, armed with a leather briefcase. I'd spent those 2 days preparing, drafting, researching. We settled down at my dining table, the very one Pearl had once mocked me from, and I got to work signing those papers. Each signature felt like drawing a line in the sand. After looking over all the documents, the notary said, "With these changes, your estate will be dealt with exactly as you've planned, family expectations aside. Are you certain about this?" "Absolutely," I said. "Where do I sign?" Once she left, I picked up a new notebook and started jotting down everything I knew. I didn't have all the details on Pearl just yet, but I was going to find them. Clearly, Gordon's finances were tight if they were so eager to move into my place. I pored over property laws, wrapped up the will updates, ruled out tactics that wouldn't work, and highlighted the plans worth going after. By the time I closed that notebook, the late afternoon sunlight was casting long shadows through the windows. My reflection in the computer screen seemed different, tougher, more at peace. I was no longer the wishy-washy host trying to get on the good side of his son's fiancée, or the dad desperately hoping Gordon would stick up for him. I'd spent my life learning to assess threats and execute plans on the fly. I'd rescued people from flames and faced life-or-death choices in the blink of an eye. I'd come through situations that would break lesser men. Pearl Morrison thought she could stroll into my home, throw jabs, and stake a claim on what was mine. She assumed I'd cave because I was older, alone, and she'd managed to sway my son to her cause. She guessed wrong. I reopened the notebook and started sketching out concrete plans, with timelines and backup options. If they wanted a showdown, they'd get one. But it would be on my terms, by my rules, and they wouldn't know what hit them until it was too late. My phone rang. It was Gordon again. I let it go to voicemail. His voice crackled through the receiver, tinged with frustration. "Dad, we've got to talk about this. You're being unreasonable. Give me a call back." I didn't bother finishing the message. I just deleted it. There was nothing left to discuss. They'd shown their hand. Now it was time for me to play mine. 3 weeks quietly slipped by. I stuck to my routine, tidying and reorganizing tools in the garage, taking calls from old work buddies, and ignoring any from Gordon. My son's silence felt strategic, like he was gathering his thoughts. I knew folks like Pearl wouldn't just roll over, they'd just hatch a new plan. The doorbell chimed that Tuesday afternoon while I was busy fixing a hinge at my workshop. Gordon stood on the doorstep, alone, a somewhat uneasy look about him. I answered the door. "Hey, can we chat for a bit?" he asked. I moved to the side, letting him come in without offering anything to drink. We settled into the living room, me in my favorite chair, him on the sofa. The air felt heavy and intentional. "So, Pearl and I are working on the wedding plans," he started, fidgeting with his hands. "Venues in Portland really aren't cheap. We want to start our marriage off on the right foot." He hesitated, looking down before spilling the beans. "I'm asking to borrow $15,000, he finally blurted out. The way he said it was so direct and blunt, I kind of respected it. "That's a big ask," I commented. "I know," he replied, "but we're family. This really matters." He began speaking faster, like a train picking up speed. "Pearl's gotten accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and there's some friction because her folks can't support her financially. She's confident everything will work out once things settle, and they promise to repay any help. But when Gordon went to his dad for money, the answer was an emphatic no. Shocked, Gordon asked, "Why?" Only to hear his dad lives on a fixed pension and just doesn't have the money. Frustrated, Gordon suggested his dad could use home equity, accusing him of not wanting to help. Things got heated. Gordon's dad was firm about not funding a wedding he wasn't sure about. Gordon got more agitated, pacing around the room, arguing even Pearl had expected this refusal. Sitting in a big, empty house, Gordon argued something could be done to help his only son get married. Calm as ever, his dad explained he bought the house himself and didn't owe any further explanation. Gordon retorted that while his dad enjoyed a spacious home, he and Pearl struggled in a small apartment, barely managing their wedding costs. "Why not share the wealth?" his dad asked. "Why tap into equity just because Pearl was used to luxury?" Irritated, Gordon stood up for Pearl, saying she was eager to join the family and even planning for the future, like hiring a designer for older homes. But when Gordon's dad stood, Gordon realized he crossed a line, hinting about revamping a house his dad wasn't vacating anytime soon. Gordon tried to backtrack, saying Pearl was just thinking ahead. It was clear, eventually, meant after his dad's time was up. To this, his dad quietly picked up a folder he'd had prepared for a while and put it on the table. It contained the latest estate plans. Gordon was taken aback, just staring at it. His dad mentioned the house would be sold when he passed, with proceeds going to a firefighters' charity. Furious, Gordon accused him of being excluded from the will. His dad calmly said he wanted his property to benefit those who respected its meaning. When Gordon argued it was because of his dad's dislike for Pearl, his dad waved it off, saying it was more about showing Pearl's true colors. Gordon picked up the folder and flipped through the papers. His hand shook as he whispered Pearl had warned about such treatment, feeling left out. His dad went to the door, opened it, signaling it was time for Gordon to go. Hesitating for a moment, Gordon finally stepped out. By his car, he was on the phone, and it was obvious Pearl had listened in on the entire conversation. He paused, looking back, his face a mix of anger and confusion. He got into his car, and from a distance, his dad could see Pearl's face on the phone screen. It wasn't a look of confusion or hurt. It was calculating. After Gordon left, his dad closed the door, reflecting quietly on what had just happened. Inside his home, he felt at ease, certain he'd made the right call. Gordon and Pearl's plans hinged on owning the house one day, but that wasn't going to happen. Throughout the day, the phone kept ringing. It was Gordon each time. His dad chose not to pick up, deciding not to engage further, letting them figure things out on their own. That night, he sat with his notebook, jotting down what happened, marking a decision he recognized as a defining moment in ink. So I caught on when Gordon let slip about some designer, and Pearl happened to be eavesdropping on the phone. That little mishap told me everything I needed to know. All their plans were impeccably logged with dates and times. My dad always hammered home the idea that in a battle, the winner isn't the strongest or the fastest. It's the one who stays the calmest. The person who can think clearly when everyone else is panicking will always end up on top. I've spent 30 years honing that skill, staying composed even when everything's falling apart. This situation was no exception. Pearl Morrison thought she could stealthily insert herself into my life by cozying up to my son, figuring she'd just wait me out until I kicked the bucket and she could claim everything. But she seriously underestimated me. Out of nowhere, a week later, my phone rang, triggering my defenses. "Dad." Gordon's voice sounded cautious, like he'd practiced. "Last time was rough between us. Pearl feels bad and wants to make amends. How about we take you out for lunch? Just to talk, no strings attached." I let the silence hang, listening to him breathe while he waited. "Neutral ground," I eventually replied. "Tomorrow at noon, I'll choose the spot." "Sure," he agreed. "Whatever you say." I opted for a no-frills diner downtown. Nothing too flashy. The kind of place where you wouldn't impress anyone with your wealth. I arrived 15 minutes early and picked a booth with my back to the wall so I could see everyone coming in, a habit from my firefighter days. Always know your exits, always keep an eye on who's entering and leaving. Just as the clock struck noon, Gordon and Pearl showed up. She had taken things down a notch. Jeans, a simple blouse, subtle makeup, none of the over-the-top jewelry like before. Her hair was softer than the usual pinned-up style. She was trying her best to look modest. They settled into the booth across from me. Pearl firmly placed her hands on the table, meeting my gaze. "I owe you an apology," she started. "Meeting you made me anxious, which led to me being too critical. That wasn't right. Gordon always speaks highly of you, and I'd like to start anew." Her tone hit all the perfect notes, sincerely regretful without being desperate, open but not vulnerable. If I hadn't already seen what she's really like, I might have been fooled. "Actions speak louder than words," I replied. "I understand," she responded. "Let me prove it." The lunch dragged on with a thin veil of politeness. Pearl inquired about my firefighting days, things she should have been curious about from the beginning. Gordon seemed to relax, as if he hoped there was finally a bridge being built between his father and his fiancée. I was engaging enough to seem interested, but I didn't let my guard down. When the bill arrived, Pearl insisted on paying, and I allowed it. I watched as she counted the money, making it a point for the server to witness her generosity. It was all a performance. A few days later, they appeared at my door with grocery bags in hand. "We thought of you at the store," Gordon said, grinning like it was an impulsive thing. It wasn't. The bags contained expensive items I wouldn't normally splurge on: fancy olive oil, artisan bread, and organic vegetables. Pearl moved around my kitchen as if trying it out, neatly putting things away, commenting positively on how I kept the place tidy, even praising the backsplash tiles she probably mocked to Gordon when I wasn't around. "This kitchen has great bones," she remarked. "You can't find craftsmanship like this anymore." They stayed for about an hour. Pearl was personable and engaging, asking about the people next door. When they left, she gave me a swift, courteous hug. Not too long, not too invasive. Gordon looked at me with hopeful eyes. Their visits became regular, happening every week and then more frequently. Sometimes they'd show up with groceries, other times offering help with yard work I didn't really need. Pearl kept up her charade, but I was watching for any slip-ups. And they came. During one visit, while glancing out my front window at Tom's yard across the street, Pearl remarked, "That neighbor of yours really needs to fix up his yard. It's dragging the whole block down. Tom works 2 jobs, I replied. He's doing what he can. She totally missed the warning in my voice. Well, property values matter to everyone. Some folks just don't understand that. I mentally filed that comment away for future reference. So there I was, just helping with the groceries, when Pearl started steering the chat toward money matters. She casually tossed out, "Have you thought about what you'll do with the house eventually? It must cost a fortune to maintain it on your own. Gordon and I have been researching reverse mortgages." I cut her off with, "I'm not discussing my finances with you." She instantly retreated, slapped on a smile, and switched subjects. But her motives were as clear as daylight. After each visit, I'd find myself at my desk, jotting down every comment she made about things like Tom's yard. Picture this. You're standing in your own kitchen, and there's someone there eyeing the place like they're planning a massive makeover. That was Pearl for you, yammering about finances even though she claimed to want a fresh start with me. About a month or so later, on a laid-back Sunday afternoon, both she and Gordon popped by. At some point, Pearl wandered off, claiming she needed the bathroom. An hour after they'd left, I noticed something off on the coffee table. There were these fancy home decor catalogs lying there, the kind I've never even bothered with. Picking one up, I spotted sticky notes marking pages, all in Pearl's meticulous handwriting. The notes read stuff like master bedroom, lighter colors, and living room, modern minimalist. She even had a note on my hideous wallpaper. It was as if she was planning designs for my home, like she owned it. That's when it dawned on me. She was dropping serious hints about her intentions. For their next visit, I was ready. "Hey, you left some light reading over here last time," I said casually, waving the catalog. Pearl's face had this momentary flicker, as if caught red-handed before she masked it with a reply, "Oh, just some ideas for our apartment." But I wasn't buying any of it. I flipped to a highlighted page, master bedroom, lighter colors. "Last I checked, you don't have a master bedroom in an apartment, Pearl." Her smile wavered while Gordon just appeared baffled. She laughed it off with, "I must have been fantasizing about dream houses, you know. Just dreaming about the furniture." But the mood shifted, getting colder, and tension twisted like a spring ready to snap. "It's my master bedroom you've got on your mind," I responded firmly, setting the catalog back on the table. Gordon piped up, "Dad, she was just—" I butted in, a notch sharper. "She was gearing up to redecorate my place. All those promises, surprise visits, pledges to turn over a new leaf. Pearl, you've merely switched up your tactics." For a moment, the mask slipped, and I caught a glimpse of her anger before she pulled back. "You're just being paranoid," she shot back. Her voice had a hard edge as she tried to seize back control. But was I? How she played the dutiful daughter-in-law, bringing groceries I never requested, acting like she cared, all the while dreaming up renovations. Gordon jumped up, frustrated. "This is crazy," he shouted. "She drafted specific plans for my house," I insisted. "Spaces she has no claim to." They left hurriedly after that, leaving a chill in their wake. Pearl's act was shattered, and she was well aware of it. Once they were gone, I flicked through those catalogs again, examining every note, every flagged page. Pearl had gone all out, matching furniture to rooms, taking measurements, meticulously planning color palettes. This wasn't just a casual glance. It was a full-blown interior redesign strategy for a house she fancied. I headed over to my filing cabinet, yanking out estate documents. Everything checked out. The charity foundation info was still there. Pearl had simply evolved her game into a slow con, her true nature unchanged beneath the polite veneer. That disdain for humble beginnings, the fixation on property, scheming for the future within my walls. She wore her intentions openly, naively thinking I wouldn't see right through it, because Gordon hadn't. But I'd let her show enough of herself. The fight was far from over. It merely went underground. But at least now I knew what I was up against. A few mundane days slipped by until one unremarkable Tuesday morning came along. There I was, munching on toast and leafing through the newspaper, the aroma of fresh coffee wafting around me from my trusty mug when the phone started ringing. Gordon's name lit up the screen. Carefully, I set my coffee down and answered. "Hey, Dad, got some exciting news." Gordon's voice piped up. That fake enthusiasm was obvious, as if he was about to make a big ask. "So, the wedding's been bumped up to July, and guess what Pearl thought of? Us moving into your house right after. You've got all this space, and honestly, we're concerned about you being alone here." Holding my phone tight, I responded, "I'm not lonely. I'm fine on my own, and you're definitely not moving in." "Don't be like that," he tried persuading me. "Look at it practically. This big 4-bedroom place with just you. We could help with costs and, who knows, be a bit of company too." "No, Gordon, that's not happening." His fake cheerfulness gave way to irritation. "You're being selfish, you know," he accused. "You'd rather sit in that big house alone than support your own son. Do you even care about my happiness?" "I do want you to be happy, Gordon, but not with someone who's constantly plotting to take my house." "Take it?" He couldn't believe his ears. "We're trying to start a family here, but you're so wrapped up in your bitterness about being alone that you can't see it." I heard faint voices on his side. Then Pearl jumped in. And with that, our conversation dwindled into the background buzz. There I was, phone ringing loudly right next to me. She'd already grabbed it. "You ungrateful old man!" she shouted, dropping all pretenses. She wasn't holding back anymore. "We tried including you nicely. And what do? Push us away. You're ruining our future just because you're bitter and alone, hating the sight of others being happy." I moved the phone away slightly, her voice still piercing through. Tiny but full of so much anger it twisted her words into something harsh. This wasn't the woman from the restaurant, all apologies and smiles, bringing groceries with a humble grin. "This conversation is over," I stated firmly. "We'll see about that," she spat back before I hung up, setting the phone on the table. My toast had gone cold, and my appetite vanished. The silence left in the room seemed heavy, like it was waiting for something to shatter. 3 days slipped by without a peep, no calls, no visits. I stuck to my daily routine, but there was this tightness in my chest, like a storm was looming. Then, the mail came. Among the bills and ads was a formal-looking envelope from Portland Realty Group. I opened it at the kitchen counter. The letter began, "Dear homeowner, thank you for your interest in our property evaluation services. As requested by Ms. Pearl Morrison, we've prepared a preliminary market analysis for your property at—" I read it over twice. They valued my house at $540,000. The request was made 3 weeks ago, around when Pearl was stopping by with groceries, all smiles, secretly assessing my house's worth, quietly plotting her next move while acting as if she cared. I immediately called the real estate company. A polite voice answered, all businesslike. I explained, "I'm the homeowner. I didn't authorize this appraisal." There was a pause. "Our records indicate Pearl Morrison reached out on behalf of the family, saying you wanted to explore estate planning options." I hadn't agreed to anything. "Send me everything related to this request," I demanded. Every email, every note, every document. She apologized for any confusion and assured me she'd send everything over. Standing in my kitchen, clutching that letter, a chilling certainty settled in. It wasn't just about Pearl wanting my house. She was already making plans for it to be hers, researching its value, dealing with agents, concocting her scheme while feeding me organic veggies, and pretending she cared. That afternoon, I headed downtown to an office I checked out a few days back. Walking into Rebecca Chen's law office, her receptionist led me to a conference room with a nice river view. Rebecca came in, notepad ready, glasses on, dressed sharply, and gave me a firm handshake. "Tell me what's happening, Mr. Phillips," she said. I spread out all the papers across her table, the property deed, an old will, a letter from the real estate folks, even Pearl's furniture catalogs with her handwritten plans for the rooms. I laid it all out, keeping my voice steady, about Gordon getting engaged, Pearl's antics, the fights at dinner, the money talks, fake apologies, and now this mess with my property. She quickly took notes, neat and precise, and asked sharp questions, examining each document closely. "What you're describing is setting up for financial exploitation," she said after looking over everything. "It sounds like she's getting ready to stake a claim on your property. The fact that she's already investigating its market value means she's thinking way ahead." "Can she really pull this off?" I asked. "Not if we document everything properly," she said. She assured me that my mental fitness was obvious and my decisions were sound. Over the next hour, she laid out strategies like adjusting the living trust, updating the transfer on death deed, legal proof of sound mind and no undue influence, setting up beneficiary confirmations through the Charity Foundation, and writing letters to make sure Gordon knows he's not inheriting this place. Each paper was crafted to shut down any routes Pearl thought she could take. "She'll have no grounds to challenge anything," Rebecca clarified. "Once these documents were signed and witnessed properly, they'd create solid legal walls that even the most aggressive legal attacks couldn't break through, especially here in Oregon, where property rights and the freedom to decide who inherits are strongly defended." For the next 40 minutes, I signed every paper, with Rebecca and her paralegal witnessing, notarizing, dating, and sealing each page. Dressed comfortably, I made a strong pot of coffee and spent the morning getting the house spotless, running mental checklists I'd been prepping all week. By early afternoon, everything was set. The dining room table ready, the kitchen in order, with a tension lingering in the air, just waiting to be sliced through like bread. Pearl Morrison entered my life just 4 months ago, with her barely hidden agenda to grab what was mine. She'd thrown out insults, twisted the way my son saw things, was friendly in the most deceitful way, dug into property prices, and designed her plans for every corner of my home. But today, with those legal defenses in place, I'd blocked the paths she thought she'd use. When my phone buzzed again, it was, no shock, Gordon. I let it go to voicemail. Now? I didn't even feel the urge to hear whatever lies she might have spun for him this time. The barriers were up. She had no power to knock them down. This house, this legacy, it was mine to keep, and it would stay with those who truly valued the effort I'd invested in it. The next week passed quietly. I lost myself in projects in the garage, tended my little vegetable patch, and shared a morning coffee at the diner with Tom next door. I came to terms with the fact that maybe the relationship with Gordon was beyond saving. The pain I expected didn't hit as hard as I thought. Maybe my heart had been pulling away, preparing for this moment longer than I'd realized. Tuesday afternoon, the phone buzzed again, and Gordon's name appeared on the screen. My first thought was to ignore it, but I went ahead and answered. "Dad," he began with a sigh, like the world was weighing on him. "I know you're angry. Pearl crossed lines she shouldn't have. The wedding's just 3 weeks out. I can't get married with this hanging over us." I stayed quiet, letting him talk, hoping for honesty. He continued. "Pearl's parents, Thomas and Donna, they're good people. Maybe if we all sat down together, we might work something out. Just one more dinner with everyone." I thought about it, weighing the chance of yet another blow-up against the slim hope of reconnecting with Gordon before he got too deep into this marriage. All right, I agreed at last. We'll have this dinner, but it'll be in a neutral place, a restaurant. I didn't want them in my space, not with things as they were. Thank you, Dad. It really means a lot. Maybe they'll see you for who you really are, he said, his voice tinged with hope. I mentally stepped back, pondering the weight of my decision and its possible finality. All right then, but understand, this is it for negotiations. After Saturday, we'll both know exactly where we stand. He sounded like a weight had been lifted. Thanks for giving this another go with us. Hold off on the thank yous, I cautioned gently. It's times like these when the truth tends to come out. We scheduled dinner for Saturday night at 6. Gordon would arrive with Pearl, and her parents would join us separately. 6 of us would gather at the table to face whatever was coming. After hanging up, I walked through my house. It wasn't just a place to live anymore. It was the stage for what was to come. The dining room where Pearl's little tricks took place. The living room where I drew the line on the wedding budget. The kitchen where that awkward real estate conversation unfolded. Every room whispered pieces of this complicated story. In the days that followed, I threw myself into getting ready. I cleaned the windows until they sparkled, letting the bright summer light flood in. I made sure nothing was hidden. The dining table got a thorough polish, its dark wood gleaming. This table had seen a lot. I washed the fancy dishes and laid out the menu, simple yet thoughtful. Roast chicken, seasoned veggies, and warm homemade bread. The meal itself spoke of care and effort without needing words. Gordon checked in twice about logistics, the nuts and bolts of the evening, no special diets, arriving right at 6, and bringing nothing but themselves. Pearl says her folks are easygoing, Gordon added. They'll appreciate everything you're doing. I chuckled softly, a hint of doubt in my voice. We'll see what they really think. By Friday night, the bushes were trimmed and the grass cut, giving off a friendly vibe even if I wasn't sure I felt all that welcoming. First impressions counted. If the evening went south, at least I'd know I tried my best. That Saturday morning, the sunrise pulled me out of bed, nerves buzzing too much to let me rest. I dressed in something comfortable, cradled a cup of coffee, and settled in, waiting for what the evening might bring. I made sure my khaki button-up looked neat and respectable. Not too fancy, just nice enough. I got a head start on the cooking. By 4 p.m., the chicken was roasting in the oven, vegetables prepped and ready. The bread was warming too, timing everything to be perfect by 6 p.m. By 5 p.m., the house was filled with the inviting smell of a homemade meal, warm and cozy. I took a final look at the dining room. 6 places set, napkins folded just so, water glasses ready, and wine if anyone fancied a glass. Standing there, hands in my pockets, I stared at the table. In just an hour, 6 people would be sitting there, each with their own hopes for how the night would turn out. Gordon wanted things to end on a good note. He was hoping for some peace between his dad and his future wife. Pearl had her own agenda, aiming to show Gordon that I was the problem, with her eye on everything I'd built. Pearl's parents were a bit mysterious. Gordon vouched for them, but he'd also sung Pearl's praises when they first met. For me, I just wanted truth to prevail. I hoped my son would see who he was truly marrying and find some closure in all this mess. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, making the polished table shine. Everything was ready, food cooking, table set, house clean, and I was dressed, waiting. I sank into the old armchair in the living room, the same spot where I'd sat, too restless to sleep after that first chaotic dinner. I clasped my hands together and took slow, deep breaths. 30 years of running into burning buildings taught me that panic never helped. Fear could be deadly. You assess the situation, make a plan, and execute it with calm focus. You stay ready for whatever comes. This wasn't any different. Whatever walked through my door, anger, manipulation, honest reconciliation, or utter chaos. I felt prepared. I had done all I could, safeguarded my property legally, readied my home, and showed real hospitality despite everything. The rest was up to the people who'd soon sit at that table. My watch ticked to 5:45 p.m., just 15 minutes to go. I got up, made my way to the kitchen, and took one final peek at the chicken. Nailed it. Shutting off the oven, I let it sit and wandered over to the front window to get a look at the street, which was empty for the moment. The sun, getting ready to set, painted everything with a warm golden hue: the lawn, the hedges, the house. This house had been my haven, something I'd spent 3 solid decades working to own outright, and kept up with every bit of energy and protection I could muster. Tonight, though, everything was set to change, one way or another. Either Gordon would finally catch on to what I'd been trying to convey, or our relationship would hit a dead end. Either Pearl's folks would offer some clarity, or they'd just end up as people I'd keep at a comfortable distance. But by the time everyone headed out, we'd all have a firm grasp of where things stood. I sauntered back to my armchair, sat down quietly, hands folded neatly, breathing calm and steady, playing the waiting game. Come 5:40 p.m., headlights washed across the window out front. I took a look at my watch. They were 20 minutes early, which was a pleasant surprise. Drawing in a deep breath, I put down the dish towel I'd been aimlessly using on already spotless counters and strode toward the door. Standing there were Gordon and Pearl. Gordon had a bottle of wine in hand, and Pearl was in a creamy dress I hadn't laid eyes on before. Their matching smiles almost seemed like they'd been practiced in front of a mirror. "We know we're a tad early," Gordon explained, shifting on his feet like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "But Pearl was ready, and we thought we could pitch in if anything still needed doing." I stepped aside, inviting them in. Pearl breezed in with a gracious air, complimenting me with, "Clarence, the place looks absolutely stunning. You've really gone above and beyond for us." She lightly touched my arm, and it felt both deliberate and effortless at the same time. "Not a problem at all." I took their coats, tucked them away in the hallway closet, and accepted the wine Gordon handed over. The label was fancy, probably chosen by Pearl. Gordon looked relieved. "See, I told you this would go smoothly." We all migrated to the kitchen. I hauled the chicken from the oven. It was beautifully browned, timed impeccably. Even if they'd shown up earlier than planned, Gordon dove right in to help, lugging serving dishes to the dining room, neatly lining them on the sideboard. Pearl stationed herself near the counter, picked up the bread basket with no need for pointers, and started slicing the loaf resting on the cutting board. "Where should I put the salad bowl?" Gordon shouted from the dining room. That's when I started to piece things together. Back in the dining room with Pearl, she was moving around like someone who knew this place like the back of her hand. She dug through the drawers until she found the serving spoons, her face glowing with the satisfaction of knowing just how everything was organized. "Yep, third drawer," she announced, a small reminder that she'd been carefully observing everything about our home, possibly plotting to take over someday. Then Gordon's phone buzzed, and the expression on his face said it all. "Really? Work now?" he muttered, half apologizing. "I'll be right back," he promised, disappearing onto the back porch with his phone pressed to his ear. I watched him through the window, pacing and gesturing as he talked. Suddenly, the kitchen seemed smaller with just Pearl and me in there. Pearl's whole demeanor flipped like a switch. She went from sweet to icy cold in seconds, her tone dropping to a feral whisper meant only for me. "Realized your big mistake yet?" she jabbed. "Gordon's on my side now, eating right out of my hand. You've been busy making moves, switching up your will, chatting with lawyers, thinking you've got the upper hand, but you're already done for." I stayed put, my hands steady on the counter. Once Gordon and I tie the knot, this place, your house, your cash, it's as good as mine, she pressed on, leaning in closer. Whether it's Gordon who talks you into it or time itself, I'm set. What have you got? A few good years left, huh? You're what, 62? It was almost amusing. I kept my cool, not backing down. Her laugh had an edge, probably thinking I'd already surrendered my last scraps of authority, left with nothing but an empty house and fading family ties. Think some papers will stand in my way? She ridiculed. You're wrong about one thing, I shot back, keeping my voice steady. What's that about? She asked, her smile as sharp as a razor. I'm not just messing around, she realized, as her eyes shifted to a darker hue. Every move she made had been meticulously planned, way before Gordon even thought of proposing. She wasn't just playing a game with an old man. She was up against someone who had fought tooth and nail for every piece of her life. When the doorbell rang, it was almost like a break from the tension. Her cool exterior cracked for just a moment before she adjusted her dress and slipped back into the role of the doting fiancé, hiding her calculating nature. She reset like nothing strange had happened, and I left her there, heading toward the dining room where Gordon anxiously double-checked each place setting. I was just telling your dad how much tonight means to us, Pearl said sweetly, a master at tucking away her sharpness for later. She was back to her charming old self in seconds flat. Gordon joined us, wearing a big smile and announcing, "Crisis averted. What did I miss?" He was oblivious to the undercurrents. "Pearl's got everything running smoothly," I replied, returning his hopeful grin with a nod. As we made our way to welcome our guests at the front door, Gordon assured me that his future in-laws were wonderful people, without any pretense. Standing there with my hand on the doorknob, I felt this strange sense that this moment carried more weight than simply meeting new acquaintances. Behind me, the house was alive with warmth, the dinner, the glasses clinking, the sense of family, and Pearl stood ready with her well-rehearsed expression, thinking she had it all figured out. But when I opened that door, there was a feeling like they might just untangle the whole mess. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with an intuition I was beginning to understand. It felt like one of those moments when you're standing in front of a building, ready to walk in, and something feels slightly off, hard to pinpoint, like how the weight of a building settles or the smell of smoke lingers out of sight. After 30 years of diving into fires, you learn to heed your instincts. When I turned that knob and opened the door, my entire world seemed to start unraveling. On the porch, there was a couple in their 60s. The man was sharp in a neatly pressed shirt, and the woman wore a simple navy dress. Both had welcoming smiles at first. "You must be—" I began, but then the man's smile froze. His expression changed, and he stopped smiling altogether. He studied my face intently, not just a quick look, but really trying to place me. He squeezed his wife's arm and said, "Hold on, Donna, really look at his face." The woman turned, focused on me, and her courteous smile shifted to confusion and then to something more profound. Her hand covered her mouth as she murmured, "I know your face." "We've never met," I insisted gently, but she was certain, "We have." The man, Thomas, moved in closer, examining me from different angles. His voice quivered. 25 years ago, you saved our daughter." Just then, Gordon, my son, stepped into the doorway. "Dad, what's he talking about?" But Thomas didn't take his eyes off me. "Our house caught fire in September 2000. We got out, but our daughter Pearl was terrified and hid upstairs in the closet." It was like time slowed as his words hit me. Pearl, the little girl hiding from the flames. I recalled rushing in when others deemed it too dangerous. Donna's tears spilled over. "You carried her out. She was out cold, but you saved her." Thomas added, "Covered in soot, You emerged with her just before the building caved in partially. You risked your life for her. I was thrown back in time, to September 2000, a fire on the east side, a family escaping, but the child still trapped. The building was on shaky ground. Backup was too far out. I had found her in that closet just in time. Pearl, I said, my mind reeling. Your daughter Pearl is our Pearl. Donna's grip on my hands was firm, like she had to confirm this was truly happening. She's got scars, but you gave her a future. You gave us our daughter back. Pearl showed up by the kitchen doorway, drawn by the sound of voices. She wore a pretend smile, but when her mom started talking about the firefighter who rescued her all those years ago, her smile crumbled. The fire, she murmured. I can still feel those strong arms carrying me. She looked straight at me then, eyes widening as memory washed over her. It was you, she stammered, her voice shaky with the realization. She dropped to her knees, hands over her face, making a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. What have I done? She kept saying, over and over. I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Everyone froze. Thomas and Donna clung to me, tears streaming down their faces. Gordon stood silent, and there was Pearl, crumpled on the floor, crying. I was stuck in the middle of it all, trying to make sense of what was happening. This woman, who had been so mean and conniving, was the same little girl I'd pulled from a fire 25 years ago. Gordon finally found his voice, though it sounded far off. Dad, you never said you were a firefighter. I heard myself replying, it was more than just a job. Thomas spoke, voice thick with emotion. You went beyond duty, risking everything. Seattle was no longer a place I could stay, too full of memories in that house, in that neighborhood. Yet, for 25 years, you were never really out of my thoughts. I often wondered if you ever realized the impact of what you gave us. Donna was crying even harder now. We tried looking for you after it all ended, but it was chaos. Our priority was helping Pearl heal, the burns, the fear, the nightmares. By the time it crossed our minds to seek you out, we had moved and didn't even know your name. Pearl made another sound, not quite words, just raw anguish. Her parents shifted their eyes between her and me, trying to grasp why their daughter was so shattered. PP, Donna spoke softly. Darling, what's happening? Isn't this great? We finally found him. Now we can finally find some peace. But I said gently, she didn't know who I was. Those words hung in the air. Thomas and Donna glanced at Pearl, then at me, confusion clouding the joy they'd felt. She's been trying to take my home, I continued, my voice detached, almost accusingly. Using Gordon, planning to move in after they got married. I had to adjust my will to protect what's mine, and she had the nerve to call me an ungrateful old man, a block in the way of her future. The room was silent except for Pearl's sobs. She was huddled up, hiding her face, her shoulders shaking. I remembered the first time we met, telling Thomas and Donna. She said I didn't need a Halloween mask because my face was scary enough. Donna raised a hand to her throat. Thomas looked like he'd seen a ghost. Through her tears, Pearl admitted, I didn't know. I swear I didn't remember it was him. I couldn't recall his face, just shadows, smoke, and someone who saved me. If I'd known... But would knowing have really changed anything? I questioned, perhaps too sharply. Or would you have just found another way to twist it? She looked up at me, her face streaked with mascara and tears, showing something real for the first time. I don't know, she confessed. I've been so angry about the scars, the bad dreams, feeling small and scared. I spent my life proving I was tough and couldn't be beaten, but I turned into... Her voice fractured. I turned cruel. Gordon found his voice. Dad, why didn't you ever tell me you were a firefighter? Looking at him, I explained, "I left that life when your mom got ill, and after she was gone, talking about the old days felt like picking at a wound." "But you saved lives. You saved Pearl's life," he pressed. "I saved plenty," I said softly. "That was my job for 30 years. Most of the time, I didn't know what became of the people afterward. I never knew their names or how their lives went on. I just did my duty and went home." Thomas looked at me with an expression that seemed to see something divine in my face. "We owe you everything," he said. "You've given us 25 more years with our daughter. We've seen her grow up, graduate, meet Gordon. All those moments are because of you." Pearl let out another heart-wrenching cry. Standing in the midst of all this emotion, I felt like my whole understanding of the story had turned on its head. The person I'd thought was an adversary was actually someone I had saved. The enemy now owed me her life, and it left me feeling unsure about what that meant. Once the initial shock started to fade, I realized we all needed to take a step forward. Standing frozen wouldn't help. "How about we sit down?" I suggested, trying to cut through the tension as I guided them toward the dining room. Thomas and Donna were clinging to each other as they moved, finding chairs next to each other. Gordon helped Pearl get up off the floor, her legs shaky, and got her settled across from her parents. She kept her eyes down, focused on the table as if trying to keep herself together. I remained standing until everyone was seated, then took my place at the head of the table. The dinner I'd prepared sat cooling on the sideboard, completely forgotten. Eating was far from our minds. I faced Thomas and asked, "What exactly happened that night?" He let out a deep breath before he began. "It was September 2000. A smoke alarm roused us around 2 a.m. By the time we got out of bed, flames had already consumed much of the first floor. There was an electrical issue, faulty wiring." His hands moved as he spoke, outlining the way the house looked, how high the flames reached. "We managed to escape through the back door and made it to the lawn. It was at that point we realized Pearl wasn't with us." Donna's voice quivered as she shared the memory. "Pearl had been asleep in her upstairs room when she heard the alarm. Instead of coming to us, she panicked and hid. It's what scared 7-year-olds do. They find a hiding spot. The firefighters arrived quickly, in maybe 6 minutes, but by then, the house was in rough shape. The captain was preparing to take action, organizing his team. We were shouting that our daughter was trapped upstairs, but he insisted there could be no move without backup. The building was on the verge of collapse. The memory started coming back to me. It was Station 12 over on the east side, a call in the wee hours. Captain Morrison, no relation to me, was there, a man who believed in following the rules. He was a prudent firefighter, yet one firefighter ignored the orders. Thomas's voice wavered, recalling it. The captain yelled at him to stop, insisting the structure could collapse at any moment, but he didn't stop. "You didn't stop." And then, like a bolt of lightning, a memory buried for a quarter of a century struck me. Back then, I'd been with Portland Fire for about 7 years. I was young enough to feel unstoppable, but also aware enough to be cautious. Yet, hearing there was a child inside, none of that caution mattered. "You disappeared into the smoke," Donna recounted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We waited. It felt endless, though it was probably just 3 minutes. You returned coughing, your face blackened with soot, carrying Pearl in your arms. She was still and unresponsive. I could remember how it felt, holding her, the weight of a 7-year-old who seemed lifeless, as beams crashed down just a hair's breadth behind me as I made my way out. The captain's face was a mix of fury and relief when I reappeared. "Out there on the lawn, they worked to bring her back," Thomas continued. "You stayed by her side until she was breathing again. You had burns on your face and arms, too." He gestured towards my arms, and I realized he could see the scars that were part of me now, faded but forever present. But you refused to leave until you knew she was okay. The captain was beside himself, Donna remarked. All you kept repeating was, "She's 7. I had to go." Pearl let out a noise, a mixture of crying and a sharp intake of breath. Her hand went instinctively to her shoulder, where she knew the scars hid beneath her skin. We moved to Seattle a few weeks later, Thomas revealed. Pearl spent a couple weeks in the hospital and continued her recovery after that. The house was gone, and though insurance took care of the financial loss, we couldn't stay in that place. Too many ghosts, too much pain. We searched everywhere for you before we had to move, but with all the chaos, we didn't even catch your name. All we knew was you were the one who saved Pearl. I looked over at Pearl. She was huddled up, hiding her face, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "Pearl, please, look at me," I said softly. When she finally looked up, her mascara had run, her eyes were puffy, and her face showed every bit of her hurt. "Why?" I asked gently. "Did you become this person?" Her voice almost broke as she spoke through her pain. "I've spent 25 years acting like that fire didn't shape me," she admitted. "Using makeup and clothes to cover my scars. I never talked about it, not even once. I put on this act of being strong, like I was beyond the pain." She took a moment. "It was all fake," Donna chimed in softly. "Every single bit." Pearl's hands were moving nervously. "I was scared people would think I was damaged, so I made myself seem untouchable, like I was above everyone. I figured if I looked down on them first, they couldn't look down on me. But by doing that," her voice shook, "I became mean." It felt like a confession. I turned into the very type of person I didn't need around while I was trying to heal. Gordon spoke up for the first time since we sat down. "Pearl, why didn't you ever share this with me?" Tears fell as she looked at him. "I didn't want you to see me as broken." His voice was gentle, but I would have understood. "Understanding wasn't what I was after," she cried. "I wanted to be seen as strong, flawless, perfect even. But look what that did to me. Look at the pain it caused your dad." The silence hung heavy in the air. I got up and looked at everyone. "I ran into that fire to save an innocent kid who deserved a shot at life," I said clearly. "A kid who was scared and needed help. It's sad to see that child turn into someone who causes hurt and acts superior, trying to take what isn't theirs. All the fake fronts and putting people down were in the past." Pearl sat there, her shoulders shaking more and more. Donna leaned over toward her daughter but stopped short. I could see real remorse for the first time, not just an act. Pearl seemed to finally understand the weight of her actions. I told her I forgave her, and she looked up, surprise written all over her tear-soaked face. "But," I emphasized, my voice firm, "forgiveness isn't the same as trust. Respect isn't given just because of our shared past. It's earned. If you want to be part of this family again, your actions need to show you've changed. Show us you're becoming that 7-year-old who needed saving." The room went quiet. Pearl just looked at me and nodded through her tears. The dinner I'd made wouldn't get eaten that night, but we'd served up something far more important: truth, understanding, and maybe a shot at change. Gordon reached for Pearl's hand, and she clung to it like it was her only anchor. Thomas looked at me as if he was seeing something almost sacred. 25 years, he said quietly. "We've been grateful without knowing how to express it, and here you are." I nodded, appreciating how life has its own timing. Donna wiped her tears and asked, "What happens now?" I glanced at all of them, Pearl, raw and honest, Gordon, a little lost but present, Thomas and Donna, grateful yet tinged with sadness. "Now," I said, "we see if words become actions, if this apology turns into real change, if understanding blossoms into something more." Pearl nodded again, tears still slipping down her cheeks. "I'll show you, I promise," she vowed. "Then do it," I said, "not with grand gestures or future plans. Start with the small decisions from now on." The night wore on as we talked more, about the fire, work, and everything in between. Eventually, Thomas and Donna said their farewells at the door, hugging me tight with gratitude that felt immense. Gordon and Pearl left soon after. As she walked out, Pearl stopped and whispered, "Thank you for saving me then, and for this chance now." I nodded, not offering empty comfort or premature healing, just acknowledging the moment. After they left, I found myself alone in my quiet house with the untouched dinner, pondering the future. I had prepared for a fight, secured legal defenses, guarded against deceit. Yet it was fate that intervened, uncovering the truth we all needed to face. When Pearl reached out a couple of weeks later asking if she could come by, my initial thought was to say no. Over the phone, she sounded different. Her voice was softer, more careful. "I just want to chat for a bit," she said. "I promise, no pressure, just if you're interested. I'll bring coffee." She arrived at my place around mid-morning, 2 coffees in hand, and a nervous air that seemed genuine. We settled on my porch. I didn't ask her in, and she didn't push to be invited. "I've started seeing someone," she said, clutching her coffee cup tightly. "A therapist who specializes in trauma and behavior patterns. I'm trying to understand why I acted the way I did." I nodded to show I appreciated her effort. "That's a positive step," I replied. "It doesn't change the past, but it shows you mean it." Pearl met my eyes and asked, "Gordon mentioned you don't talk much about your firefighting days. Can you tell me about it?" I shrugged and said, "It was my job for 30 years. I did what needed to be done." She nodded and asked, "You saved plenty of people besides me, right?" I shrugged again. "Some. Can't save them all." That lingered for a moment. "But you tried," she said softly. "And that's what matters." We chatted for about 20 minutes. Pearl was genuinely curious, listening without trying to steer the conversation back to her. She thanked me as she left, not pressing for another visit, but she came again the following week and the next 2. Our talks were short and careful, but bits of the old Pearl seemed to be fading away, replaced by someone trying to put themselves back together. By early August, the wedding was being planned, looking nothing like Pearl's initial grand idea. Gordon called to fill me in. It was going to be a simple garden ceremony with about 30 guests, minimal and genuine, not the lavish event she used to dream of. They wanted it to be a personal celebration, focusing on what mattered rather than putting on a show. I was there, quietly seated in the 3rd row, watching them say their vows. Pearl was shaking a bit, I noticed, but her voice remained steady. Thomas and Donna were in tears during the vows. The reception felt sincere and heartfelt, lasting roughly 2 hours. A week after, Gordon reached out with some updates. "We found a 2-bedroom in the Hawthorne district," he said. "We're moving there on September 1st. "That sounds fantastic," I told him. "You're starting off in your own space." "Yep," he chuckled. "Pearl insisted it should be our place. She wanted our marriage to begin there." His words brought a sense of relief and satisfaction. They had respected the boundaries I'd set, not out of obligation, but because they wished to do so. Mid-August, I got a letter, handwritten and 3 pages long. It started with, "Dear Clarence, I can't change calling you scary when you open the door or take back mocking your furniture, neighborhood, or life. I can't erase trying to take what was yours. All I can do is express my regret and thank you for the chance to become someone better. You saved me twice, first from the fire and then from myself, by not letting me remain cruel without consequence. Thank you for both." The letter continued with apologies for her past actions and acknowledgement that real change takes time and effort. I sat at my desk, thinking about how to reply, and eventually penned a brief response. I see the work you're doing. Keep at it. Respect grows through steady actions. I'm open to seeing where this goes. I mailed it the following day. As August neared its end, the evenings became pleasantly warm, offering a comforting calm like the kind that follows a strong storm. I found myself sitting on the porch, watching the neighborhood ease into dusk. Behind me, my house stood steady and unchanged, a solid place that belonged to me. Papers I once had ready, their purpose as tools or defenses, now put to rest. My phone buzzed, displaying Gordon's name. "Hey, Dad," he said. "Pearl and I were thinking of checking out that new Italian spot downtown this weekend. Want to join us?" His voice was easygoing, without any strain, just a son inviting his dad to eat out. "Is Saturday okay?" I asked. "Great," he answered. "Just dinner, nothing too fancy. We'd love to see you." "Sounds great. I'll be there." After the call ended, I sat quietly, watching the day's last light fade, while reflecting on past plans for payback and defenses, about the walls I'd put up to protect myself. Those things were necessary back then but became unnecessary, not because of my plotting, but because the truth had its way. I had braced for a fight, ready with documents, determination, boundaries, and a sense of justice to defend what was mine. However, I realized my adversary was someone I once rescued, a person hiding behind toughness because of the scars from a fire I had pulled her from. The irony wasn't lost on me. My heroic act unknowingly turned into my future challenger. Facing the truth changed us both. When Pearl confronted who I had become, her defenses collapsed under the weight of truth, giving her a chance to genuinely start over. My victory lay not in punishing Pearl, but in upholding my dignity and boundaries, creating room for an honest change. I won by sticking to my values, protecting what was mine, without resorting to meanness. The real test wasn't about property or legal battles. It was about respect, truth, and the chance for change. As the evening cooled, the streetlights flickered on, and a dog barked somewhere nearby. A typical night in an ordinary neighborhood. This was my neighborhood, my home, my safe haven. 25 years ago, I saved a 7-year-old girl from a burning building, unaware she would grow up to challenge all I valued. But, in the end, I also offered her the chance to become someone else. Sometimes, it's best to let things unfold on their own. You don't need revenge when the truth is on your side. The best victories often come from standing firm amid chaos until peace finds you. So there I was, getting up, stretching, and stepping inside my home. Tomorrow I'd catch up with Tom from next door over coffee. Saturday night was dinner with my son and his wife, and the upcoming week promised some gardening, tinkering in the garage, and simply enjoying my life. The struggle was over, not because I crushed my opponent, but because the truth changed her, and I held my ground to see it through. That was a win. That was justice I could live with. I closed the door, locked it with a satisfying click, and let a smile spread across my face. My home, my peace, my life, all truly mine.